Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. We are now past the halfway mark in September, and so far it has been an interesting month. Warm, or very warm even, early on, but then last week it turned much cooler or even colder because there were some distinctly chilly nights. Here in Berkhamsted, my weather station recorded an overnight low of 3.4 degrees, and I suspect that in the surrounding valleys, values were perhaps 2 or 3 degrees down on that. So a widespread ground frost even in southern parts of England on 1 or 2 nights last week. But overall, so far this month, temperatures have actually been very close to the 30-year average, or even a little bit above them. It depends which 30-year series you compare them to. Well, back to the here and now. How are things shaping up as we head through the next 2 weeks? I think there are some significant developments on the way. So without further ado, let's begin with the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. And at the outset, Tuesday the 17th, 18 GMT, what we see is a big area of high pressure bringing settled weather to all areas. As I run this, not much changes in the short term, it stays fine, but then through Friday and into the weekend, pressure begins to fall in the south. Showery rain starts to become a risk. Now, I'll come back to this a little bit later, but there is the potential at least for some heavy and thundery downpours. Anyway, continuing through this sequence, what we see is those downpours become more widespread for a while. There's also an area of low pressure bringing showery rain to the north, but towards the end of the week, high pressure returns. It's mostly dry. Lots taking place there. The upper air temperature sequence and jet stream profile here shows orange shading over the United Kingdom at the start. The orange is used to indicate warm or very warm air aloft, and as I run it, that orange just slowly is diluted into yellows and greens as cooler air filters in and the jet stream becomes more active. It's quite a messy picture developing there through the second half of the first week. Now, what does all that mean in terms of the conditions which we can expect to experience down at the ground level? A few charts here to illustrate. Wednesday the 18th, fine right across the UK, perhaps unbroken sunshine in many areas, and it's quite warm too, 20-21 Celsius there in parts of Scotland, a few degrees up on that in the southeast. Forwards to Friday. Now it's at this point when things begin to happen. We can see showery rain then in the southwest and southern Wales. In the north, it's remaining dry, temperatures perhaps a little bit lower, but still very pleasant. I think though it's just worth emphasising that really the details start to become uncertain now. This has the showery rain, as I said, in the southwest. It could be a little bit further east. It may not be developing yet at this point, but it's the general direction of travel which is important, because as we go through the weekend, the chance of further showers or long spells of rain continues in the south and perhaps moving northwards into central areas. Where confidence is higher is in the northern half of the United Kingdom, because it does look like it will be staying fine there. Temperatures may be down a little bit once more, but still very pleasant for the time of the year, and this has unbroken sunshine on Sunday in Northern Ireland and much of Scotland. I think perhaps there will be a little bit more cloud than this indicates, but still the key thing is that it's likely to be dry. Thunderstorms and downpours, though, as I've mentioned, are a risk. The charts here generated from the UKV model are for Friday and Saturday. They show Cape values, and the orange shading indicates the areas at greatest risk of thunderstorms. So you can see, according to this model, on Friday it's really the southeast and East Anglia, maybe stretching further into other parts of southern England. But then on Saturday the risk has become more widespread, moving up into central areas too. A little bit different to what the GFS was showing. Which will be correct? Well, who knows? They could both be wrong, but the key message is there is that chance of downpours, and it's increasing through Friday and into the weekend. Keep up to date with the short range forecasts. In more general terms, here are the forecast rain totals for days 0 to 5 from the ECM and GFS models. ECM on the left there is interesting because if you look closely, you'll see that one grid point in southern Wales, just on the border, I think, with England, has a total of 53 millimetres of rain. Much higher than all the surrounding ones, and that's really just highlighting the possibility of localised downpours. But it's really important not to look at that grid point if you're sitting under it and thinking that rain's coming to me, because it may not. It's just highlighting the localised nature of the rain and the fact that the greatest chance of some downpours occurring is in southern Britain. Moving forwards to the 0 to 10 day period, ECM's really wrapped up those totals in southern and central regions. The orange shade indicating over 100 millimetres in a couple of locations. Usually values that high would be reserved for the northwest of the UK. GFS on the right has lower totals, but still significant amounts of rain in the south. So I think there is the possibility of some disruptive rain in southern parts of Britain through the first week in particular, maybe into the second week too, but it's important, as I say, to keep up to date with the short range forecasts. How do the main deterministic models compare with each other as we head towards the end of the first week? Are they consistent, showing broadly the same pattern, or have they gone off in different directions? Let's see. Here is the GFS, Tuesday the 24th of September. A weak ridge of high pressure is building across the UK. Conversely, with the Canadian model, it's a low pressure dominated scenario, so a greater chance of showers or longer spells of rain if this one is right. The German icon has a deep area of low pressure centred in the Atlantic and a weak ridge toppling across the UK, rather similar to the ECM. And finally, the UK Met Global, areas of low pressure there to the north and to the east for southeast. Quite significant differences between the different models on these updates. It makes it very difficult to be confident about how things will be developing at this point. I think the best which can really be said is that all in all, it looks quite changeable. There is that chance of showers or even longer spells of rain. Temperatures maybe not too far off the norm, but the possibility of drier conditions, at least for a time, is not excluded. Now, does that continue to be the case as we head through week 2? As I always mention at this point, it's just about the general trends and the probabilities. I'll start with the 16-day GEFS plot for London. 850 HPA temperatures across the top. Well, they look very close to the average. Runs are climbing above the 30-year norm, the thick black line, and dipping below it. But none of them seem to be locking in a particularly cold or warm pattern, so fairly changeable or unsettled, and that message is reinforced by the rain spikes along the bottom, plenty of them, and they continue to appear. 2 metre temperatures. The data tables here show maximums through the days and minimums through the nights, mostly oranges. Those are 16 to 20s, and the nighttime lows between 11 to 15, according to most trends. I think it's worth just mentioning about this point that the forecasts here are for London. If you jump outside into rural areas, even into the home counties, there would be more green showing up on these nighttime lows, dipping down into single figures more widely once you get out of the London area. Now up to Manchester, very, very similar. Close to the average, upper air temperatures, an ongoing risk of rain. The 2 metre temperature data tables, that was a little bit lower than on the London one, but really very similar in terms of the trends. Finally at Glasgow, a little different here. If anything, there is a signal for 850 HPA temperatures to be slightly below the 30-year norm. Also, lots of rain spikes there. Across the bottom, it's a wet outlook if this is to be believed, with temperatures probably just a little below the 30-year norm, at least at this level, which is 1,500 metres above our heads. In terms of the temperatures down at the surface, yellows there through the days, 11 to 15s, and the nighttime lows, mostly for light greens, 6 to 10s, but quite a significant amount of dark green, those runs which would be cold enough to give a ground frost, at least many of them would. Also, some are blue starting to appear, and of course, those runs going for 0 Celsius or lower as we head towards the end of September and through October. So in the coming weeks, you would expect at least to see more and more blue starting to appear. Rainfall through the second week. These charts are generated from the ECM ensemble, and they show the percentage chance of 5 millimetres or more of rain falling on the first 3 days of week 2. To begin with, the highest chance there is in East Anglia and the South East. It's quite a strong signal there for some wet weather at the beginning of week 2. But then through the second and third days, the pattern transitions back to a more typical one. The orange shading there in the west indicates around about 60% chance of 5 millimetres or more of rain falling on the third day. The next 3 days keep that theme going. The orange shading really concentrated on western parts of Britain, Northern Ireland. It all points towards an Atlantic flow, so weather fronts hitting western parts of the UK first, dropping most of their rain and then weakening as they progress eastwards. Something else I just wanted to quickly highlight is the possibility, at least, of it turning windy or even very windy as we head towards the end of September. This shows forecast wind gusts for Cardiff. It's generated using data from the GEFS model. Unlike the other charts, it only goes out to 10 days ahead, not 16. But if you look on the right-hand side, there are a number of runs there going up to or even a little bit above 50 miles an hour, and one which is climbing above 60. So something to keep an eye on as we head towards the end of the month. And I think the mean surface level pressure data table for York backs that up to a degree. There's lots of green, some blues, and a little bit of purple. Greens are below average pressure. The blues and purples are indicating distinctly deep areas of low pressure coming into play. And as I say, remember that this is for York. It's quite likely that the wettest and windiest conditions would be further west. The GEFS mean surface level pressure plot for Friday the 27th, so it's just a snapshot for that given day generated using all of the individual runs, points towards a west or a southwesterly flow, low pressure close to the northwest of UK, maybe a tad further south. Then it's sort of default there between Scotland and Iceland, unsettled or changeable at the very least. So, to summarise, week 1, fine and warm early on, but then the risk of thundery showers increases in southern and possibly central areas. It may then turn more changeable generally, although by the end of the week there are some indications that high pressure will be building in from the west once more, and that could lead to a mostly dry start to week 2. However, it is then likely to turn unsettled, with wet and windy periods developing in all regions. Temperatures trend back towards the average. So there we have it, a very mixed picture. Fine conditions early on, the risk of thundery downpours in southern and central regions, more generally unsettled or changeable at least later. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. As ever, then, if you did, please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. If you do that, you'll not miss any of my future updates. Also, remember to keep up to date with the day-to-day weather developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.